What's better for learning, reading physical books or digital books? Like many of you watching this channel, I read a lot. And this often brings me to the question of what is the best way to read for learning, especially because I like reading a lot of nonfiction books. We hear things about how our phones are rotting our brains and affecting our memory. And whenever I struggle to recall something from a book that I've read, I lean into arguments like this as a way to explain it. It feels like it helps to put the blame somewhere. But is it really true? Or do we have a lot more control over the situation, regardless of what medium we read on, than we originally thought? So that's what I want to explore today, including the two most important strategies to remember more of what you are trying to learn. And these strategies will help you get more out of the reading experience, regardless of whether you're a paper advocate, a Kindle crusader, or an iPad intellect. But let's start with the most important point on reframing your thinking around the battle between digital books and physical books for learning. It starts out with understanding the myth of learning styles. Some researchers argue that we learn better from physical books because of the tactile nature of paper, but is this actually true? This was the evidence that was leaned into in The Shallows, the book by Nicholas Carr that I've talked about in another video on this channel. More recently, though, in the book Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, he talks about how learning styles is a myth. There is no repeatable evidence that we learn best through any specific medium. So here's what I think we should take away from this information as it relates to the battle between reading on physical versus digital books. Communication through speaking is what we've evolved around. So making sense of patterns on paper, which is essentially what reading is simply an offshoot of verbal communication. So I think that because of this, reading on physical paper would not make it a superior learning tool compared to reading digitally. So if you find yourself questioning that and whether you do learn better reading on paper versus digital, it's probably more of a result of two other factors that are important to consider when we read books digitally. These are things that we can tweak and work on improving no matter how we like to read and consume information. The first and most important is focus when it comes to reading. And the second one is how you make use of that information that you're learning and try to teach it or translate it in some other way. Focus is the most important first step to absorbing new information. And a physical book is a single tasking object by its nature. It's one topic, one point of view, one page at a time. So almost all the time when we pick up a physical book, it's one point of view from one author, unless it's a textbook or an anthology or something like that. We're getting a single train of thought, and that's forcing us into a focused state on that topic. But with any digital device, it only takes half second to swipe away from the information on the screen in the ebook that we're reading. And this is still the case, while less so with Kindle versus an iPad. It's super easy on the iPad. With a Kindle, it's pretty easy to very quickly switch between multiple books that you're reading, especially if you're somebody like me who has multiple books on the go at any given time. This can be really handy if we're trying to reference other sources with the information that we're processing and absorbing, as I'll talk about in a little bit. But it's also a trap that we should be aware of when we're trying to read deeply and focus on the information that we're learning. Whenever you want to focus for deep reading, be prepared to set your device up to eliminate distractions and allow you to stay immersed in that one book, that one topic. The reason that I bring this up and it's important is that most people just don't do this. Whenever they are distracted or bored with whatever they're reading, they immediately swipe away from the screen and do something else. If I'm tired when I'm reading, it becomes the exact same thing for me. If it's at the end of a long day and I'm reading something, I'm trying to learn it, but I hit that state where it's very easy to just switch over and swipe through the news app or see what my local Reddit community is complaining about today, that becomes a simple habit that we get stuck in the pattern of doing. And we need to be aware of this if we're trying to learn something very specifically in a digital environment. So the awareness is key, but if you haven't already set up a system that will work for you in order to keep those distractions at bay and focus deeply, do deep reading, whether it's on your iPad or Kindle, I'll leave the links in the description to those two videos where I've talked about how I set up my Kindle for more efficient reading and how I do the same thing when reading on an iPad. Once you've set yourself up to spend your reading time block actually reading and not trying to multitask and do other things, you'll find that your retention dramatically improves. Now, the next thing is, how are you using that information? Look at the information that you absorb from the books that you read, even the things that you learn in fiction, not just as passive entertainment, but as something that you want to use to help yourself to grow and contribute in some other way. It's how we apply that information or teach it to someone else that makes that information stick. Whether you're reading just for general self-development or to learn a specific skill, be ready to do something with that information and take action. Teach it to someone else, write or do something about it creatively, or bring it up in a conversation with a friend. When you're able to articulate the concepts that you've learned in a book, you have absorbed the essence of what the author is writing about. And this means that you've surpassed and overcome any of the limitations that may be perceived from different learning styles. Just don't lock up the knowledge that you absorb from the books that you read to wither away. Find ways to make use of it and reinforce it so that it can connect to the strands of other information that you've gathered through your journey. And there are a lot of ways that technology can actually help to enhance this step if you learn to use it the right way. To solidify my understanding of the information in nonfiction books, I like using Shortform. Their writers do a really great job of putting together comprehensive summaries of nonfiction books, but also creating exercises and study guides that have a lot of different prompts and questions that help you to explore the information deeper and apply it for yourself. You can either use it, like I do typically, as a companion to reading the full version of a nonfiction book, but it's also a great way to shortcut your learning through the summaries of the books themselves if you don't have time to read through the full book. And if you want to check out Shortform for yourself, since you're coming from my channel, you can get 7 days for free, as well as 20% off if you choose to subscribe at the end of the free trial. Simply click the link in the description. I'll make sure that I include it so that you can check it out if you want. Now, the other crazy unlock that I recently have gotten much more into using is ChatGPT, specifically for a book companion when I'm reading different nonfiction or even fiction. So it took me 4 months to get through, but I finally finished reading Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, the 5th book in the Stormlight Archive. I got it as a Christmas gift, and I've been digging through it for the 4 months or so until about the end of March when I finally finished reading it. But something that I realized along the way was there is so much information in this 1,300 page book, and I was excited that I got the physical copy just because it's so epic to read this massive brick of a book that is so different from the way I typically read only Kindle versions of most fiction books when I'm just trying to relax at the end of the day, or read fiction when I don't have enough energy for nonfiction. But it was really fun to get back into a physical copy with this book. The thing that I realized was there's just so much in that Stormlight Archive and all the pages of the information. So I started using ChatGPT as a reading companion and basically prompted it to not give me any spoilers from Wind and Truth, but to help me figure out who some of the side characters and the different plots that I couldn't quite remember from the first 4 books. This was a really useful unlock for getting into remembering, kind of piecing together key things so that I could really enjoy and get more out of the book. So it works great for fiction, and it also is a really powerful way to read through nonfiction. You can ask and have it be, a challenging companion to whatever you're reading. So if you want the counter arguments or the counterpoints, or maybe things to watch out for that you need to question more about whatever book that you're reading, ChatGPT can be really useful in that way. So try it out for yourself. Next time you're reading a really long series and you can't remember all the important details, or even with whatever nonfiction you're reading, check out some of the counter arguments, some of the things that you should pay attention to the most in a book as it's coming up. There are so many different ways that you can make use of AI tools like ChatGPT in order to have this really great book companion. So you might not obsess over questions like what's the best way to learn, what's the best reading medium, the way that I do, but hopefully after this video you won't have to question it anymore. Remember that it comes down to focus first and using that information in some meaningful way second. Even this video is an example of pulling on the strands of things that I picked out from reading The Shallows and comparing it to books like Hidden Potential that argue the opposite and say that learning styles are myths that we shouldn't subscribe to. Now, if you enjoyed watching this video, I'm sure you value the immersion in the story and reading deeply to extract important information. So if you want to learn how to get into flow while reading, check out this video next, and I will see you over there.